Hey, how's it going? Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Coach Sneed here at Clovis North Educational Center in Fresno, California, doing my project presentation regarding psychological interventions for especially in athletics. The first intervention, or as I'm up here, I have three different interventions we're going to talk about. I'm going to explain and analyze each one, followed by how I would implement them in a sports setting. Then we'll go into the positives and negatives of each psychological intervention. First off, let's talk about self-talk and what it is. So self-talk, there's such a thing as positive self-talk, negative self-talk. With self-talk, it is the process of an athlete or a coach or anyone that's participating to be talking to themselves to either make them calm down and make them kind of reassure them. It's used as a great motivational factor, especially when you're learning a new skill or maybe things you're facing a tough situation. So a situation that would be a good example as a quarterback, 2 minutes left, no timeouts, down by a touchdown, you got to go down and score. What is that quarterback saying to himself in his head? One of those things could be, hey, I got this. We've done this a million times. We've done it in practice. This week we did our 2-minute drill. It looked really good. We're gonna go down the field right now and we're gonna score. We're gonna tie this game up. That would be positive self-talk. Self-talk can be used in so many ways. If I'm learning a skill, I could be saying, hey, if I'm throwing a football, I gotta really make sure I keep my feet still. When I throw this ball, I can't drop my elbow and drop my arm down. Everything's got to be up and out, high and over the top. So as a quarterback, I would say, hey, I'm going to throw this ball. Make sure I keep the ball up. Everything's within this little range right here. So just saying those little things like that can really help during the process of athletics. So implementing self-talk. Okay, so how I would implement self-talk is I would hint at cues that the quarterbacks or any player can use, like talk about the mechanics of throwing a football. I would give them those cues that they can use for themselves. I also think having kids practice that is a really good tool. Doing that in practice, even telling teammates, hey, great job, hey, keep it up. Always encouraging. I think when there's an encouraging environment and there's a positive learning environment, you're going to see more learning take place, and I think you're going to see more of a cohesive group together. And I think just believing in themselves. So getting them to believe in themselves by using self-talk is how I would implement that. And I think once they've got the hang of it, it becomes really easy from there on. The positives. When we look at self-talk, the positive things that can come out of it is it can really make an athlete calm down, relax, focus on the situation. I think concentration can improve big time when we are self-talking to ourselves. You especially positive self-talk. You kind of get back into that, what you learned before, and hey, I've done this a million times, or hey, I can do this. That encouragement and that thought that I can do it, it ends up increasing performance as well. A good quote that goes with that is, those that can and those that can't do something are both right. Saying if you think you can do it, you're going to do it. But if you don't think you can, then you're not going to be able to. Which kind of plays right into the negatives as well. If you go into something going and you're hesitant, or you're questioning your abilities, or you're questioning, oh man, last time we were in this situation, I had that free throw that I was going to shoot, and I missed it, and I lost the game for us. And now I'm in the same situation again. I hope I don't miss again. Okay, so that would be a good example of a negative outcome if you're using negative self-talk. So self-talk is really important that you keep it on a positive note, and that you focus on things that are measurable. You focus on things that you can actually do. Keep it reasonable. That's a good start with self-talk. I think self-talk is extremely important, especially during a game, because you're not always going to have that coach right next to you playing. So if you're able to talk to yourself as an athlete and just keep your mind right and keep yourself on the right page, it can be a great asset or a great tool to use during gameplay. Moving on, relaxation. Relaxation is a great psychological intervention. Relaxation can be done by yourself. It can be done with the help of a coach. It can be helped with teammates as well. What I would use to explain and really analyze relaxation It is how a player can lower his arousal or stress levels to get them into that optimal performance range. We talked about the inverted U in this class. A player having really low performance, they have optimal performance, but then it gets too high. So when we're talking about when a player is there and their arousal is way too high and their performance has dropped, how can we relax them? So I think what I would say with the relaxation, I think it's you can practice it, number one, but I think it's also something the coach has to be able to take upon himself or herself to get the athletes to learn to relax. One I read an athletic journal, and it talked about actually you taking 10 minutes of practice and implementing the relaxation techniques. What they were saying was, it's got to start with, you got to close your eyes, control your breathing, feel your chest come in, go out and come back in. And you'll slowly start to feel your breath start to slow down, and the relaxation will occur. Then after that, 2 or 3 minutes of that, you start focusing on the sound of your breath. And it's amazing, the stats that they found, how it ended up lowering the anxiety levels of not just athletes, but just people in general. So it's a great relaxation tool or an exercise that you can do to implement the relaxation techniques. I think for me personally, implementing a good relaxation technique is being able to talk to our athletes. I had a really interesting situation this year. I had 2 quarterbacks that were the complete opposites of each other. I had one quarterback that was always, very up and down, all over the place, and when he was down, his performance was terrible. When he was too high, his performance was even worse. So finding that middle ground when he was too high, of just getting him to relax a little bit. The other quarterback was super consistent, never was too high, never too low, but part of it for him was you couldn't see the anxiety inside of him. So you could tell sometimes when he started throwing the ball a little high, it was just his adrenaline was too high, and he was missing his target for that reason. So what I would do for him, a little bit different than the other one, I would tell him, I would tell him a funny joke or something, talk about something that has nothing to do with football. Especially pre-game, when everyone's stretching, you have a time to talk to everybody. Talk about hey, how was your day? How was school? Get their mind away from all the pressure that's on them at the moment. I think doing little things like that can really alleviate a lot of the stress and a lot of the thought of they don't want to lose, the thought of, we're going in this really important game. So you get them just to relax a little bit and drop that arousal level into that optimal performance that we were talking about with the inverted U. The positives of using the relaxation intervention. A positive of it is obviously we want to get our guys and our athletes into the position to be successful. And if they're too up and they're too worried and they're too stressed, we're not going to get their best performance out there. So obviously a positive is getting them just to feel comfortable with their situation. And also, I think it also allows us to focus and really concentrate on what we have to do technique-wise in certain situations, and just remembering the little things that, whether it's a game planning tool, whether it's, in this situation, remember that, say if I'm an offensive quarterback and I'm playing football and, and it's 3rd and long, well, they like to send a blitz from my left side on 3rd and long. So I got to know, okay, so this is probably coming, and I think by knowing those little things, you feel more comfortable in that situation, even though you know that's probably their best blitz, and it's a tough one for us to pick up. But I know it's coming, so I think there's a confidence level that comes from the relaxation model. The negatives, and I kind of hit on a little earlier, not knowing your athletes. If you're trying to get a player to relax, but he's already good, you're going to relax him even more to the point that his performance will probably drop. And I think it's the same that goes for a guy that's, if he's too low already and you're just trying to get him involved, I think it can have a negative effect on him. So I think doing those things, I do think that there is more of a positive by bringing those athletes into the optimal performance levels. But I think the hardest part is just realizing which athletes need it and which athletes don't need it, because not all athletes do a good job with the relaxation. All right, moving on to the last of my psychological interventions, which is imagery. I saved imagery for last. I think this is probably the most important as far as preparing an athlete for success during competitions. I think when we look at imagery, it's basically the art of imagining yourself doing something correct before you do it. I use the example all the time. I think the first time I was ever introduced to imagery, I was about 10 years old. I was playing Little League Baseball, and our coach would always talk about, "Hey, go home tonight before the game, and when you're sitting there having dinner and when you're laying in bed, I want you to think about, there's runners on second and third with 2 outs in the last inning, and that pitch comes in, and you load your hands, you throw your bat out, and you see the ball going through the hole for a base hit and those 2 runs scoring." I do think that I took that to heart, and when I went home that night, I thought about it. And obviously the situation never happened. It'd be awesome if it did, but I think just imagining yourself doing something positive gives you that extra confidence to execute whatever is going to be needed of you during that game. With the implementation of it, it's a little bit more difficult. I think just practicing those little things, trying to get kids to put yourself in those situations. One thing we did this year with our football program was we started doing the situations for them. So during practice, instead of just doing a session where we're just running plays versus a defense over and over and over, and there's no rhyme or reason, we made it down and distance. So we added, it's 1st and 10 for this play. The next play is 2nd and 2, then it was 2nd and 9, 3rd and short, 3rd and long. And so just having those situations, I think practicing those situations is an imagery type of deal, because they get to see it during practice, and now when you put them into the game, they've experienced that situation. It's a feeling of already seeing what's been happening and going ahead and executing it during the game. Also with the implementation, I think imagery is not only seeing what you to do before you do it, but I think your body learns the muscle memory, the thought of seeing it already. It's like an extra repetition. So I think anytime you can implement imagery, it's going to be a positive thing for your team. The positives of imagery and why we really like it as coaches, why we really like it as athletes, is what I said before. You feel like you've already seen that situation. So if you've already seen the situation, it's not new to you, and you're not unsure, you're not nervous, the anxiety level won't be as high, you're going to feel more comfortable with what's going on. It's going to make you, hopefully, your performance is going to be way higher. The negatives of imagery, just like imagine yourself doing something positive, there's also the thought of you can imagine yourself doing something negative. So I talked about earlier with the self-talk, like if you've done something or you've been in a situation and you messed it up, you missed that last second free throw to lose the game. So you've seen that before, and now it can be kind of happen again, which is why I think tying in all 3 of these and implementing all of them to a certain aspect, I think they're all going to benefit from each other. But I think if we really look at the positives, negatives of imagery, there's so many more positives to it. Whenever you can just see yourself doing something correctly, I feel like I do it as a teacher all the time. In my PE classes, I feel like I've done it as a coach. I used to do it as a player, and I think it just prepares you for that situation. So when it actually happens, it's not something new to you. Before I end, I also want to throw in with the imagery part. One coach that I had, he used self-talk and imagery a lot. I was an assistant coach. His name is Jimmy Moore, a head basketball coach, and he always talked about free throw shooting as just a total confidence and mental thing. He goes, free throw shooting, it should be the easiest thing in the world, but people go up with no plan. They just dribble the ball a couple times, throw up a shot, and it's usually like I can't miss this. I don't want to miss this in front of everyone. But so his way of using self-talk and imagery is he would literally have the kids, they'd stand there. He goes 3 times dribble, try to dribble hard through the ground. And after 3, you got to look at that rim. He'd say, hold the ball with your left hand if you're a right-handed shooter. He'd say, shoot, or actually throw your hand up like you're seeing, and you want to see that ball. Imagine that ball going through the hoop. 1 more dribble, and then he'd always talk about finishing on your toes. So finish on your toes, get good lift, and as you finish on your toes, you all of a sudden, by thinking about all those things I just talked about, you're not even worried about the shot anymore. You're just worried about following the routine and making that routine the same. And so now the shot just becomes an actual routine type of deal. What I mean by that is your body's done it so many times and you're so used to it, you're not worried about the mental side of it. The mental side of it is now wiped out, and so the physical side of it presents itself. And if you've practiced it enough and muscle memory takes over, it's amazing our free throw percentages, how high they were compared to other teams, and I think that was a huge part of it. So in conclusion, I do think that using psychological interventions is a huge part of sports. I think we subconsciously do it all the time. I think all three that I talked about, as different as they are, they should all be interrelated, and they're all trying to accomplish the same goal. The same goals we have is as far as getting our athletes prepared, putting our athletes in situations that are conducive for success. And I think that by doing those little things, it can really help our athletes get in the right situations mentally, and so that their physical performance is going to be a lot better. Thank you.